What did the Enlightenment promise us? It promised us freedom on the basis of being able to think for ourselves and thus govern ourselves. That was really the premise. That if we were released from constraints of myth and tradition, released to be able to think and reason and discover what was true for ourselves, that was the source of our freedom. But something happened at the end of the 20th century, which was this new way of thinking about society and human beings as a market. What does it mean to rule yourself if we are all meant to think of ourselves as commodities and everything is marketized? What's really tragic about the economization of every aspect of life is that we're really seeing the Enlightenment dream come to a kind of end, where the mandates of a financialized society all but extinguish the real freedom to make yourself according to your own lights.
In the early 2000s, we made a film, The Corporation. We argued that large, publicly traded corporations are programmed relentlessly to pursue profit and growth and have become the dominant institutions of our time. We showed that the corporation is deemed by law to be a person, that it has the same rights as human beings, sometimes even more. So we posed the question, if the corporation is legally a person, what kind of person is it? We analyzed it the way a psychiatrist would analyze a patient. We found his character to be pathologically self-interested. Now, with the world in crisis, climate change, spiraling inequality, a global pandemic, we re-examine the corporation, how it's changed, how it's changing our world, and how it's changing our very sense of who we are. To begin this story, we take you back to the 2000s. At that time, the corporation was in crisis.
This meeting will come to order. This is a case of America's largest corporate bankruptcy.
Enron and WorldCom had collapsed in corporate scandals of unprecedented magnitude. Corporations were being called out for malfeasance that was destroying lives and the environment. Around the same time, globalization was sparking worldwide protests against the growing power and impunity of the corporation. And our first film had just charged that corporations are institutional psychopaths.
I think calling corporations psychopaths absolutely had an impact, and I can say that for myself. When I had to consume that particular thought, that was interesting, to use a very soft word. It was outrageous. Has it influenced it? Yes. Are we on the road to recovery? I hope we are.
About 2005, we started to see many of the world's biggest branded companies suddenly making very sweeping promises. Promises such as 100% carbon neutrality, zero waste to landfill, zero deforestation, 100% recycling, a real and significant shift.
Since that shift, corporations have mounted a major charm offensive, rebranding themselves and rebranding the entire capitalist system as having changed, having evolved into something new and improved.
I think there is genuinely a different dialogue that's taking place about corporations and the role that they play in society. That cult of shareholder value has seen its day as the narrow construct for how companies operate in society.
Wait, what did he say?
That cult of shareholder value has seen its day as the narrow construct for how companies operate in society.
This idea that making money for shareholders is no longer the corporation's only goal, it's the essence of the new story, the story that corporations now tell about themselves.
What is the purpose of a company? Is it just to make money?
This is Klaus Schwab, the man who first came up with the idea of a new kind of corporation.
Companies recognize that they have a special responsibility, how we combine or how we blend money making and social responsibility.
To advance his ideas, Schwab built the world's most important annual gathering of corporate titans and world leaders.
Every year, Davos in Switzerland hosts one of the most important gatherings of the global super elite. It's kind of the first stop in the elite's yearly migration route. People who are successful and make a lot of money are a dime a dozen, but these are the people who are the most successful.
But Davos isn't only a meeting place for the super elite. It's also where corporate chiefs and government leaders come together each year to promote the story of the new corporation. That corporations are conscientious now, no longer greedy and selfish, but poised to help make the world a better place. Sandra Navidi is a Davos insider and author of a book about the world's most powerful players.
These financial elites have great power, and in some instances, this power actually exceeds those of democratically elected people or institutions.
This is Jamie Dimon. He heads the biggest bank in the United States and is a leading voice for corporate America.
So, the Jamie Dimon reception, there will be some introduction to the clients, right?
This is Sanjay Jain, one of Dimon's top executives at JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah.
He's advising a prospective client.
No, but I knew that we needed to be here because Davos is the place where all these people come together for a week. It's insane what happens here.
And here's the client, Bebop Gresta.
Hi, Bebop Gresta, very nice to meet you.
He's looking for investors in his company that's developing a transportation capsule that travels at the speed of sound.
Sorry. Oh my God. Sorry, excuse me. Hi, this is Bebop Gresta, chairman of Hyperloop.
Oh, good. Yeah, I saw some of your colleagues. Thank you. Good luck to you.
In 2009, when the financial crisis happened, JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon in particular picked Detroit as the one city in the entire country we were going to save. And so you need to say to Jamie, I just want you to know that we are building a Hyperloop to Detroit. We care about Detroit as much as you do. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, got it?
Got it.
Script?
Got it.
These guys will.
How are you?
Jamie, thank you for inviting me.
Are you going like to a black tie tonight?
Well, yeah, they
You
said.
just dressed like this.
No, I wasn't there.
And I was telling Tony Blair,
How are you doing? Nice
you
to meet
you guys have something in common.
Yes.
We're in a rock band.
Right.
He had his own rock band before he was prime minister.
That's true, that's true. I don't know what I was expecting from a person like Jamie Dimon. I discovered a person that installed a very great culture inside their company. They're starting programs trying to improve society, creating a special program for Detroit reconstructing completely. I wasn't expecting that. I know what you've done for Detroit and all the effort that you did to save it. And it's not public yet, but we signed a deal with Ohio to actually build an hyperloop to Detroit. You know, we are trying to contribute. Following your example, I think it's a very important project. It's a big year for us. It's exciting.
I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Davos is a place of interaction, of dialogue. We look at the ecosystem of what's happening, but always with a sense of responsibility for us, and us, it means not just one country, not just one person. I think at the end, we are all a globally interdependent humankind.
So here in Davos, we debated the motion, is the business of business still just business? And interestingly, more than 80% said no. In today's transformative age, business has a wider accountability and opportunity.
We're in a new age of doing business. You need to give back. You need to be part of the solution. Society is demanding that companies, both public and private, serve a social purpose.
There is a new possibility. We can imagine something different. It takes courageous leadership, and it takes people who get it here, and who get it here, and who understand that life is short and precious, and if we're in positions of power and influence, that we should use that to help shift the paradigm and the possibility of what it means to be a business on the planet and what it means to be a human being.
It all sounds so good. This talk of a new kind of corporation. In Davos and everywhere else.
For many businesses, the commitment to the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet is real. The problem is, the capitalist system as a whole is not committed to that.
There are CEOs and corporate boards attempting to do good in the world. There clearly are. But the notion that there's anything inherently socially responsible about a corporation is a counterintuitive proposition. By law, the corporation exists for one reason, to return benefits to shareholders.
There is no such thing as corporate social responsibility. Corporations don't have the leeway to sacrifice shareholder returns for doing whatever they want or whatever they believe is socially responsible.
What then do we make of the corporation's new image? Of the claim corporations have changed? Since our last film, the American Psychiatric Association has added a new item to its diagnostic checklist.
You always have to come back as a leader to purpose. Why are we here? Why are we doing business? And we want to do business for the long term. Values are part of the purpose of a company.
John Brown is a leading voice in today's new corporation movement. When he was CEO of the world's second largest oil company, he professed deep environmental beliefs while achieving record profits and meteoric growth.
You basically, for the first time, an oil company executive stepped forward to say, global warming is a problem. It set BP apart.
I think people are much more convinced now, at least around the world, that there is a real case to take precautionary action to avoid carbon concentrations going to beyond a critical level in the atmosphere.
My sense is that John Brown's concerns are genuine. His interest in the environment is genuine. His concern for workers and for people's safety, theoretically, is genuine. But those desires are just inherently conflicting with the need to make money, because turning a profit for those corporations is always going to come first.
I need an ambulance at EMTs right now. There's people trapped in the trailer. They need help.
In 2005, when I was CEO of BP, we had a terrible tragedy. 15 people died in a refinery explosion in Texas City.
This is the second time people have died at this plant in less than a year. In that time, it has been fined for more than 14 safety violations.
All of us at BP are very deeply saddened by the loss of life and injury suffered by so many people. After Texas City, we were at pains to say safety must never be compromised for financial performance. We were very concerned to make sure that safety, operational safety, process safety, took primacy.
It's ridiculous for John Brown to suggest that he had adequately addressed process safety in the wake of the Texas City refinery. It was less than a year later, his company had a spill in Alaska on oil pipelines, which it turns out were not maintained.
Technicians at Prudhoe Bay warned it was understaffed, lacking in routine maintenance, leak-prone, and vulnerable to...
There was a specific decision to save money by not running corrosion tests in those pipelines. It's the same kind of thing that led to the Texas City explosion.
Yet BP claimed it had learned its lesson from Texas City.
In 2007, I left BP, and I thought, this is great, this company has got it. What was so depressing to me was that yet again, people died. And while I wasn't there and I didn't know what had happened, I could see some terrible echoes of history.
While John Brown had left BP, some things hadn't changed.
The poor decisions that led to the Deepwater Horizon echo and track what John Brown instituted in the company a decade or two before. John Brown pushed the largest cost cut that I've heard of at any corporation in any kind of industry, not just the oil industry. You can't do that without cutting corners on maintenance of equipment, without pushing timetables. And that's the culture that he built. When given that choice between doing good and doing well for your company, the fact that publicly held companies have an obligation to deliver to their shareholders, making those profits will always be the highest priority. Those trend lines are just headed in opposite directions, and I think they always will be.
We are just to make it clear, a for-profit institution, and we are making an investment in Detroit.
Remember Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase? He's the CEO who wants to save Detroit. Detroit was devastated by the 2008 financial crisis. A third of its homes were abandoned. Over the next 5 years, it spiraled towards rock bottom.
When the 2008 financial crisis hammered North America, long-suffering Detroit was hit especially hard.
Detroit is officially the largest city in history to file for bankruptcy.
After bankruptcy, Jamie Dimon and his bank stepped in with vast amounts of capital.
Why Detroit? So obviously it's good for the bank, but it's part of humanity, trying to help your city and your people come back and recover from what had been basically a terrible 20 years.
Jamie Dimon wants to rescue Detroit, but what's misleading is he wants America to believe that he and, by implication, JP Morgan Chase Bank, are somehow the good guys, that they are leading us in the direction we ought to be going in, without any memory that he and the bank caused, in part, a huge recession that wrecked the lives of millions, tens of millions of people.
At one point, the market fell as if down a well.
The NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
3 of the 5 biggest independent firms on Wall Street have now disappeared.
Major sectors of America's financial system are at risk of shutting down.
The 2008 financial crisis was the result of corporate misconduct and reckless speculation. That malfeasance nearly destroyed the global economy.
It cost the American economy about $20 trillion in terms of lost housing value, lost productivity from the recession. Millions of people lost their jobs. Millions of others were thrown out of their homes. People were really hurt.
The nation's biggest bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, has agreed to a $13 billion settlement with U.S. government for misleading investors and mortgage agencies about the safety of mortgage-backed securities it sold ahead of the financial crisis. That would be the largest fine ever paid by a single bank to settle civil charges, yet doesn't even resolve a possible criminal case.
But J.P. Morgan Chase's caring image helped mask its self-interested nature.
I think we have to acknowledge that as a kind of private sector propaganda, it has been remarkably successful.
This is Anand Girdadas, an expert on how corporate elites cloak profit-making in virtue.
When you have someone like Jamie Dimon, who is running an institution that paid fines for its role in helping to cause a financial crisis, that wiped out communities. We're talking about obliterated certain communities. When you have someone like that who then turns around and says, "I'm gonna save Detroit," what's so amazing is this kind of two-step that this plutocratic group has been able to pull off. You first create conditions in which people in a city like Detroit are shattered by your speculation decisions. And then you have the gall to market yourself to those folks as their Christ.
We were here in the darkest moments for everybody at all time. We didn't run, we didn't hide, and we figured, if we can help in Detroit, you can help anywhere.
We participate in this game that allows the very people abetting harm to our society or actively harming our society to reinvent themselves as saviors.
But that's part of a larger game corporations now play. Making feel-good promises with bright smiles, appearing to be different than what they really are. If the new corporation had a playbook, what might it look like? What would its key plays be?
I am here with Bill Gates. I'd love you to tell our readers what the heck creative capitalism is.
Can we take some of the caring and innovation power, the resources of corporations, and get them to focus more on the needs of the poorest?
Bill Gates put his idea of creative capitalism to work, pouring billions into investments in Africa, including a multi-million-dollar stake in a startup company called Bridge International Academies.
Good morning, class.
Good morning, teacher.
How are you?
We are fine, thank you, teacher. And how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Bridge is a flagship of creative capitalism. We serve children living in poverty. Even people who are living in poverty, they are earning cash. And they're earning cash for a reason. They're earning it to be able to spend it on things they need in their lives.
5 years ago, my co-founder Shannon and I decided that an aggressive startup company that could figure out how to profitably deliver education at a high quality could radically disrupt the status quo in education, ultimately creating what could be $1 billion new global education company. Private schools for the poor is a $51 billion a year market. No one's even thought about it.
In the global south, what we've seen is the emergence of chains of schools, for-profit schools, to compete against the public education system. One of the biggest players is Bridge International Academies. Venture capitalists invest in Bridge schools, Pearson, the World Bank, Zuckerberg, Gates, and the list goes on. We hear of creative capitalism, but that's promoting a world where the market would dictate terms with respect to the provision of education.
We take lessons that other large global service providers use, like McDonald's or Starbucks. We build for scale, we systematize, we standardize. We call this vertically integrated platform, our academy in a box.
think what is so interesting about this social business thing is, on the surface, it seems incredibly noble. They're saying money-making should not be the sole goal of a business, it should also have a social purpose. But what it is also saying is that the kinds of change that we ought to pursue are the kinds of change that kick something back to the winners.
But those interested financial reasons are good for the world. If we succeed in serving 10 million children, which I know we will, it's still only about 1% of children who need improved services in their government and community schools. So I hope we not only get there, but far transcend it, and in so doing, be a good partner for our shareholders and those who've entrusted us with their capital to try to make a big impact.
This is colonialism, pure and simple. Fundamentally, Bridge is saying, give us your education system. We will take care of it. Public education is one of the basic commitments of a democratic society. Education is not non-political, it's not apolitical. You teach a set of values when you're teaching. You cannot rely on Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, the World Bank to take over and provide the education that you should be providing yourself.
Bridge is in business. When you want to utilize poor citizens of this world as a source of income, they're making money out of utilizing unqualified teachers.
We believe everyone is a teacher, and everyone could be. There are certain core skills you need to have. You've got to be able to read. It might seem like a low bar, but you have to start somewhere.
It's true. Bridge teachers know how to read, but they're required to do a little more in their classrooms because they follow scripted lesson plans read word for word from a tablet.
It's telling you all of these different ways to behave. Move away from the board, circulate in the classroom, give them one-on-one coaching.
You cannot have teachers who behave as robots. Follow a scripted curriculum that tells you walk 3 steps to the blackboard, walk around the classroom, and that's a teacher ought to be a natural teacher.
From an investment point of view, that because of a tragic failure of our existing systems, there's an incredible need for services to solve these problems. People have just kind of said, well, if hopefully the government will fix it, but fix it with what?
Government can't fix problems. It's a defining idea of the new corporation, a key play in its playbook, and it goes back nearly half a century.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We believe that government should be severely limited in the way in which they say that they're entitled to impose their judgment on what the people want.
If you look at the real problems of poverty and denial of freedom to people in this country, almost every single one of them is a result of government action.
In the 1980s, corporations were frustrated by the limits on profits that they felt were imposed upon them by the combination of labor unions, increasing regulation, taxation. And that combination of things led to a kind of rebellion, one that wouldn't overthrow democracy in some overt way, but choke it, leash it, tone it down, and above all, replace it with markets.
Corporations formed alliances with governments they had helped elect, governments that were in fact anti-government and that happily lifted limits on corporate freedom. Profits soared, but a price was paid, and not by corporations.
What you get is this profound anti-government program to create deficits through the combination of tax cuts and military spending so as to make it impossible to use government in a positive and constructive way to deal with our social problems.
Mr. President, on behalf of the business leaders here in the room, let me particularly congratulate you for the historic tax reform passed last month, greatly reducing the tax burden of US companies providing a tremendous boost to the global economy.
I cannot wait to sign these giant tax cuts. It'll be the largest tax cuts by far in the history of our country. JP Morgan Chase, they just announced earnings and they were incredible. Where are you? They were very substantial. Will you say thank you, Mr. President, at least?
Thank you, Mr. President may be in order. Apparently, he believes he played a strong role in JP Morgan's blowout quarter, best profit for any bank ever in history.
Corporate profits are the highest they've been in decades. Fast forward a few months, global pandemic. The rich keep getting richer, and our friends on the other side said, what do we do now? Let's do a tax cut. 36 million people unemployed. 40% of families who have a worker that makes $40,000 a year and less lose their job last month. 4 million people didn't pay their rent, and the Republican Party says, we don't have any money to help you. Are you kidding me? Where do you guys live?
And while corporations lobby for and profit from tax cuts at home, they further avoid taxes by stashing profits abroad.
The corporate elite is best positioned to use the system that we have to their advantage, and one manifestation of that is tax havens.
Every year, corporations squirrel away billions of dollars in tax havens. And when that's combined with tax cuts, guess what happens?
60 of some of America's biggest companies reportedly paid no federal income tax for 2018, despite earning billions of dollars in profits.
This is my first time at Davos, and I find it quite a bewildering experience, to be honest. I mean, 1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about, how we're wrecking the planet. And I hear people talk in the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency. But then, almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. We got to be talking about taxes. Yes. That's it. Taxes, taxes, taxes. All the rest is bullshit, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Government used to have a lot of power to extract wealth in the form of taxes and then be able to use that wealth for the betterment of the society as a whole. But what's happened now is that we have given more power to corporations to control their wealth and to take it out of the tax system.
So what happens as a result of that? First of all, companies and rich people get a lot richer, not paying those taxes you might have been paying. Second thing that happens is the government has less money. The government's capacity is sort of contracted. And then social problems start to grow, in part because the government has less money. Now, with that background, rich people step onto the scene and say, oh my gosh, this is a shame. This situation we see here is a shame. We got all these social problems. And government, my gosh, the government should be solving this stuff, but it isn't. That is embarrassing. Well, I'm happy to solve these problems, but of course, when we do solve it, we're going to do it my way. We're going to privatize the solution.
The privatizer's blueprint, often also called starve the beast. You create a crisis of confidence.
How much money do we need to be investing right now in the United States in water infrastructure?
By 2020, 44% of all water infrastructure in the United States will be classified as poor, very poor, or beyond life.
You deny resources for quality public services.
In the 1970s, there were a lot of pools of free federal money. That has really, no pun, dried up.
And lo and behold, the answer is privatization.
What we believe is that private industry is part of the answer, which is very consistent with what the president's plan is.
American Water Works is one of the world's largest water corporations. It takes over public water systems and runs them for profit. And around the world, there are many other companies doing the same thing.
It's an absolutely terrifying notion, privatization of water. Moving in exactly the wrong direction, access to potable, clean drinking water is a fundamental human right. It's just insidious that the corporate mind could even conceive or imagine the notion of privatizing it.
Corporations have figured out that there are really big business opportunities in these public sectors, in part because they've been walled off from corporate influence in the past.
The private sector is voracious in seeking to privatize almost everything.
First, privatize government services as much as possible, and also the seizure and the commodification of the public commons, your parks, your public schools, your streets. How can we get more money out of the public commons?
The for-profit motivation is always a very bad reason for providing public services. There's a conflict of interest between whether you're going to pay off the shareholders or whether you're going to invest in the public system. Many responsibilities and obligations must be public in order to maintain equal access to the basic necessities of life. A healthy democratic society has a thriving private sector and also a thriving public sector. And as we permit the private sector to encroach upon and to literally absorb the responsibilities and obligations of a democratic society, we lose our democracy.
And the rise of big tech corporations is now accelerating this process. For example, in schools. Not only in Africa, but elsewhere too.
Corporations have decided that they should remake education by using technology. They want to have teacherless classrooms. But the teacher is the single most important and expensive part of education. In the tech industry's dream, if the teacher is removed from the equation, then you can cut costs dramatically.
These companies monopolize everything. First of all, monopolize their sector, and the next thing is to look where's left. These giant corporations are frantically searching for new sources of profit because it's drying up. They say, we need to take the education system, take the healthcare system, take the transport system, and own it, or we die.
Silicon Valley is the new Rome of our time. The Valley has become this extraordinary power center that has a huge say over what kind of media and information we have in a democracy, over, frankly, how many of our biggest problems are solved, over how election campaigns are run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Technology is neutral, and in many ways it's great. But there's a difference between the technology and allowing a few powerful players to manipulate it for their own ends. So we've gone from this wide open world that opened up all of these possibilities for people to create things, to share information, to share ideas, and it has collapsed into these walled gardens that are controlled by a few very powerful players.
We're seeing Amazon, for example, gobbling up every kind of business in sight. They're interested in getting into pharmaceuticals. They're making a big move into food.
They capture about half of everything that Americans spend online. And they're growing into all these different directions. They control 35% of the world's cloud computing capacity. They're building out shipping and logistics infrastructure that is scaled to take on the Postal Service and UPS. And increasingly, they are the intermediary for all of our smart devices. Alexa, their voice system, is 70% of the market. And on it goes. They're making investments in finance, in healthcare, hit movies and television shows. Amazon is increasingly setting the rules for what happens in its marketplace and pretending like that's a real market, but of course it's not. That's a direct threat to democracy, a very fundamental threat to democracy.
Though elected by no one, corporations are now starting to be treated like governments.
We're joined now live by the world's first ever tech ambassador. Can I start simply by asking you, what exactly does a tech ambassador do?
Well, we're basically trying to treat the technology and the tech companies in a way which is similar to the way we treat a bilateral relationship with countries all over the world. The value of their stocks is more or less the same as the GDP of France, and we think that that is being translated into influence over political affairs. We think it is necessary to treat them in a way which is similar to the way we treat other countries.
A lot of folks in the Valley believe that the companies they are building are kind of replacements of government. I think if we don't push back against the kind of agenda that these companies have, we're going to live in a world in which they are governing us privately through the profit motive, but governing us.
The deal that the corporations want from us is to hand everything to them, all the value to them, and we get a little bit of utility. We get usefulness. It becomes easier to study, or easier to get to work, or easier to take a health test. That is a dangerous deal, because nobody can guarantee what is going to be done with the information. We're handing our data with no checks, no balances, no control over it. I think that's going to be one of the new challenges of life in the 21st century.
I'm going to call them the super social media corporations, the entities that really run our lives right now. The scope of their reach cannot be underestimated. They know everything about us. Every single aspect of what we do, who we do it with, where we do it, what we buy, is a gold mine for aggregators. It lets them mold their policies and their products, predicting how you are going to live the rest of your life. They're trying to influence the decisions that you make from now to when you die, so that it will best serve, ultimately, the corporate bottom line.
Technology provides us such a seductive fantasy. Our smartphones, our data-driven systems, our social media platforms, they are all designed to conceal the true cost of these technologies to our society as a whole. Privacy is usually the value that we use to think through these issues. But for me, it's not about privacy, it's about control. The drive to make data profitable leads these companies to say who we are and define who we are to other people. Let me use a real-life example of a hiring algorithm. You'll do an interview, they'll analyze your video footage, and they'll say, you challenge the status quo, you are a change agent. Don't hire this person because they are more likely to cause trouble at work. As far as the algorithm is concerned, you are not a human being, you're just a collection of data points. And this is one of the dangers that we face today, because we are now saying we need to stop using human reason and we need to rely more on these kinds of algorithmic decision-making systems. We are increasingly surrendering our capacity to rely on human experience and to trust in each other. So the question that these technologies are really raising for us is, what does it mean to be human? And this kind of technology of strangers is one of the ways in which we are moving away from the genuine heritage of the Enlightenment.
We're taught that it is all about me. Narcissism, the cult of the self, the idea that consumption can somehow help us overcome our alienation, make us important.
I thought, what better way to cure the darkness than to go shopping? Help stimulate the economy.
These were all, I hesitate the word values, but these were all consciously instilled in the public. It upends traditional values of thrift, self-effacement, communitarianism, and replaces them with the values that we now define as American values, but which should properly be called corporate values.
In recent years, we've drifted, almost without realizing it, from having a market economy to becoming a market society. The difference is this: a market economy is a tool, a valuable and effective tool for organizing productive activity. But a market society is a place where almost everything is up for sale. We are so steeped in this commodification that it's hard to distinguish between being a consumer and being a citizen.
I'm not much of a believer in political citizenship. I actually believe much more in the power of the marketplace.
This is Richard Edelman, one of the world's most influential business gurus.
I think companies actually have filled a void left by government. Business is at the top rank. Government and media really are at the back end of the trust rank. These are big changes in reliability of business as potential good actor.
It's a brilliant strategy. They're going to present themselves as good actors and use that as part of their image and as part of their branding. When we see a big corporation doing something, it creates a sense of hope that maybe we can solve the climate crisis